Hello, and welcome to Screaming in the Cloud, with your host, Chief Cloud Economist at the Duckbill Group, Corey Quinn. This weekly show features conversations with people doing interesting work in the world of cloud, thoughtful commentary on the state of the technical world, and ridiculous titles for which Corey refuses to apologize. This is Screaming in the Cloud.
This video is sponsored by Teleport.
It seems like there's a new security breach every day. Are you confident that an old SSH key or shared admin account isn't going to come back and bite you? Of course you're not, because this isn't your first day working with computers, and you're not a dangerous liability to yourself and those around you. Since you're responsible, check out Teleport. Teleport is the easiest, most secure way to access all of your infrastructure. The open source Teleport access plane consolidates everything you need for secure access to your Linux and Windows servers, Kubernetes clusters, databases, and internal applications like the AWS Management Console, that Jenkins box you swore you'd replace 3 years ago, GitLab because GitHub is just too mainstream, Grafana because to hell with it, you're building your own Datadog, Jupyter Notebooks because Python dependencies are the devil's work, and more. Teleport's unique approach is not only more secure, it also improves developer productivity. To learn more, smash the link below and also the like and subscribe buttons while you're mucking around down there and not looking at me like you should be doing.
Welcome to Screaming in the Cloud. I'm Corey Quinn. There seems to be a trope in our industry that the real engineers all follow what more or less looks like the exact same pattern, where it's you wind up playing around with computers as a small child, and then you wind up going to any college you want, as long as it's Stanford, and getting a degree in anything under the sun, as long as it's computer science. And then all of your next jobs are based upon how well you can re-implement algorithms on the whiteboard. A lot of us didn't go through that path. We wound up finding our own ways to tech. My guest today has one of the more remarkable stories that I've come across. Carla Stickler is a software engineer at G2. Carla, thank you for agreeing to suffer my slings and arrows today. It's appreciated.
Thanks so much for having me, Corey.
So before you entered tech, I believe this is your first job as an engineer. As of the time we're recording this, it's been just shy of a year that you've been in the role. What were you doing before now?
Oh boy, Corey, what was I doing? I definitely was not doing software engineering. I was a Broadway actress. So I spent about 15 years in New York doing musical theater, touring around the country and Asia in big Broadway shows. And that was pretty much all I did. I was also, I also was a teacher. I was a voice teacher and I taught voice lessons, and I had a studio and I taught at a couple of faculties in New York. But I was 100% ride or die, like all the way to the end. Musical theater or bust from a very, very early age. So it's been kind of a crazy time changing careers.
What inspired that? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a common pattern of someone who had an established career as a Broadway actress to wake up one day and say, you know what I don't like anymore? That's right. Being on stage, doing the thing that I've spent 15 years doing. You know what I want to do instead? That's right. Be mad at computers all the time and angry because some of this stuff is freaking maddening.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
That inspired you to move?
It sounds crazy. It was kind of a long time coming. I love performing. I do. It is like my heart and soul is with performing. Nothing else in my life really can kind of replace that feeling I get when I'm on stage. But the one thing they don't really talk about when you are growing up and dreaming of being a performer is how physically and emotionally taxing it is. I think there's like this narrative around like being an actor is really hard and you should only do it if you can't see yourself doing anything else, but they don't actually ever explain to you what hard means. You expect that, there's going to be a lot of other people doing it and I'm going to be auditioning all the time and I'm going to have a lot of competition, but you never quite grasp the physical and emotional toll that it takes on your body and your, just on going in auditions and getting rejections all the time. And then when you're working in a show 8 times a week and you're wearing 4-inch heels on a stage that is on a giant angle, and you're wearing wigs that are like really, really massive, you don't really, no one ever tells you how hard that is on your body. So for me, I just hit a point where I was performing nonstop and I was so tired. I was like living at my physical therapist's office. I was living at like my head therapist's office. I was just trying to like figure out why I was so miserable. And so I actually left in 2015 performing full time. So I went to get my master's in education at NYU, thinking that teaching was my way out of performing full time.
It does seem like there's some congruities there. There are some congruities there between instead of performing in front of a giant audience, you're performing in front of a bunch of students. And whether it's performing / educating, well, that comes down to almost stylistic differences, but I have a hard time imagining you just reading from your slides.
Yeah, no, I loved it because it allowed me to create connections with my students. And I found I like to help inspire them on their journeys. And I really like to help influence them in a positive way. And so yeah, it came really natural to me. My family, I have a bunch of teachers in my family. So, teaching was kind of a thing I just assumed I would be good at. And I think I fell naturally into. But the thing that was really hard for me was while I was teaching, I was still I had like one foot in performing. I was still like going in and out of, the show that I've been working on, which I didn't mention. So I was in Wicked for like 10 years. That's kind of like my claim to fame. And I had been with that show for a really long time. And that was why when I left to go teach, that was kind of my way out of that big show, because it was hard for me to explain to people why I was leaving such a giant show. And teaching was just like a natural thing to go into. I felt like it was like a justifiable action, that I could explain to like my parents for why I was quitting Broadway. So, I love teaching, so I kept that one foot kind of in Broadway. And I was still going in and out of the show as like a vacation cover, filling in whenever they needed me. And I was still auditioning, but I was still so burnt out, like I still had those feelings of like, I wasn't booking work. I think my heart just wasn't really in it. Like every time I would go into audition, I would just feel awful about myself every time I left. And I was starting to really reject that feeling in my life, because I was also starting to find there were other things in my life that made me really happy. Like, just having a life. Like I had, for the first time in a very long time, I had friends that I could hang out with on the weekends because I wasn't working on the weekend. And I was able to like go to, birthdays and weddings, and I was having like this social life. And then every time I would go,
and they did other things with their lives, and it wasn't all shop talk all the time, which, speaking to someone who lives in San Francisco and worked in normal companies before starting this ridiculous one, it seems that your entire social circle can come out of your workplace, and congratulations, it's now all shop talk all the time. And anyone or might be married to who's not deeply in tech just gets this long suffering attitude on all of it. It's nice to be able to have varied conversations about different things.
Yes. And so I was like having all these I was having these life moments that felt really good. And then I would go to an audition and I would leave being like, why do I do that to myself? Why do I need to feel like that? Because I just feel awful every time I go. And so then I was having trouble teaching my students because I was feeling really negative about it. And I was like, I don't know how to encourage you to go into a business that's just going to like tear you down and make you feel awful about yourself all the time.
And then you got into tech?
And then I was just like, tech, that's great. No,
like, I'm sad all the time and I feel like less than constantly. You know what I'm going to use to fix that? I'm going to learn JavaScript. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm going to just challenge myself and do the hardest thing I can think of because that's fun. Sort of. I was not ever, like being an engineer was never like on my radar. My dad was an engineer for a long time. And he kind of always would be like, you're good at math. You should do engineering. And I was like, no, I'm an actor. I don't want to do that. And so I kind of always just like shoot it away. And when a friend of mine came to my birthday party in the summer of 2018, who had been a songwriter, and I'd done some readings of a musical of his. And he was like, I'm an engineer now at Forbes. Isn't that great? And I was like, what? How did that happen? I need you to back up, explain to me what's going on. And I just like, I went home and I could not stop thinking about it. I don't know if it was like my dad's voice in the back of my head or just, it was like the stars aligned. My misery that I was feeling in my life and like this new thing that just got thrown in my face was just such an exciting, interesting idea. I was like, that sounds, I don't even know what that looks like, or I don't even know what's involved in that, but I need to figure out how to do it. And I went home and I just started teaching myself how to do it. And I would just sit on my couch and I would do like little coding challenges. And before I knew it, like hours would have passed by. I forgot to eat. I'd forget to go to the bathroom. Like I would just be like groove on the couch from where I was sitting for too long. And I was like, oh, I guess I really like this. It's interesting. It's creative. Maybe I should do something with it.
And from there, did you decide at some point to pursue, like there are a lot of paths into tech these days. There's a whole sea of boot camps, for example, that depending on how you look at them, are either inspirational stories of how people can transform their lives / money grabbing scams. And it really depends on the boot camp in particular. Is that the path you took? Did you remain self-taught? How did you proceed from there's the whole couch to 5K running program. What is about, I guess we'll call getting to tech, but what was your couch to 100K path?
Yeah, I was just going to say couch to 100K tech gig.
Yeah.
My friend had gone to Flatiron School, which is a boot camp. I think they have a few locations around the country. And I initially started looking at their program just because he had gone there and it sounded great. And I was like, cool. Great. And they had a lot of free resources online. They have like this whole free like bootcamp prep program that you can do that teaches Rails and JavaScript. And so I started doing that online. And then they had like a part-time class. I like learning in person, which is funny because now I just work remote and I do everything on Google, but it's like Google and Stack Overflow. So, but I knew at the time.
I have bad news about the people who are senior. It doesn't exactly change that much.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So I don't feel bad about telling people that I do it.
We're all full Stack Overflow developers. It happens.
Exactly. So yeah, I just, they had like a part-time front end class that was like in person 2 nights a week for a couple months. And I was like, okay, that'll be a really good way to kind of get my feet wet with like a different kind of learning environment. And I loved it. I fell in love with it. I loved being in a room of just people trying to figure out how to do something hard. I liked talking about it with other people. I liked talking about it with my teachers. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to invest in a boot camp. And I did their like immersive in-person boot camp. So this was 2019 before everything shut down. So I was able to actually do it in person. And it was great. It was like 9 to 6, 5 days a week. And it was really intense. Did I remember everything I learned when it was over? No. And did I have to like spend a lot of time relearning a lot of things just so I could have like a deeper understanding of it? Yes. But like, I also knew that was part of it. You know, it's like you throw a lot of information at you, hope some of it sticks. And then it's your job to make sure that you actually remember it and then know how to use it.
I think that as people, we are rarely as one-dimensional as we imagine we are. And for example, I like working with cloud services. Let's not kid ourselves on this, but I have a deep and abiding love affair with the sound of my own voice. So I'm always going to find ways to work that into it. I have a hard time seeing a future career for you that does not in some way, shape, or form tie back to your performing background, because even now talking about singing, you lit up when talking about that in a way that no one does, or at least should light up when they're talking about React. So do you think that there's a place between the performing side of the world and the technical side of the world, or the phases of your life, that's going to provide interesting paths for you down the road?
That is a good question, Corey. And I don't know if I have the answer. You know, I think one thing, if there's anything I've learned from all the crazy things that happened to me, is that I just kind of have to be open. You know, I like to say yes to things. I'm also learning to say no, which has been really a big deal for me.
Oh, yes. No is a complete sentence, and people forget that sometimes at their own peril.
Yes, I have said no to some things lately, and it's felt very good. But I like to be open. I like to feel like if I'm putting out good things into the world, good things will come back to me. And so I'm just trying to keep that open. I'm trying to be the best engineer that I can be. And I'm trying to also, if I can use my voice and my platform to help inspire other people to see that there are other ways of being an artist. There are other paths in this world to take. I hope that, other things will come up to me. There will be opportunities, and I don't know what those look like, but I'm open. So if anybody out there hears this and you want to collaborate, hit me up.
Careful what you offer. People have a disturbing tendency of saying, well, all right, I have an idea. That's where a lot of my ridiculous parody music videos came from. It's like, so what's the business case for doing it? It's like, I think it'll be funny. It's like, well, how are you going to justify the expense? Oh, there's a line item in the company budget labeled spite. That's how. Mm-hmm. And it's this weird combination of things that lead to a path that on some level makes perfect sense. But at the time you're building this stuff out, it feels like you are directionless and doing all these weird things. Like one of the, I guess, strange parts of looking back at a path you take in the course of your career is in retrospect, it feels like every step for the next was obvious and made intuitive sense, but going through it, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm like the dog that caught the car and they need to desperately figure out how to drive the thing before it hits the wall. Mm-hmm. It's just I don't pretend to understand how the tapestry of careers tie together, but I do know that I'm very glad to see people in this space who do not all have the same ridiculous story for how they got in here. That's the thing that I find continually obnoxious, this belief that there's only one way to do it, or you're somehow less than because you didn't grow up programming in the 90s. Great. There's a lot of people like that. And yes, it is okay to just view computers as a job that pays the bills. There is nothing inherently wrong with that.
Yeah. And I mean,
I just wish people were told that early on.
Yeah, why not, right? Why didn't anybody tell us that? Like, the thing that I did not, it took me a long time to realize, is that you do not have to be passionate about your job. And that's okay, right? All you have to do is enjoy it enough to do it. But it does not have to be.
You have to like it on some level.
Yeah, you do have to like it.
Dreading the 40 hours a week, that's a miserable life on some level.
Like I sit in front of my computer now all day and I enjoy it. Like I enjoy what I'm doing. But again, like I don't need to be the greatest software engineer that ever lived. I have other things that I like to do. And it allows me to also do those things. And that is what I love about it. It allows me that ability to just enjoy my weekends and have a stable career and have a stable life and have health insurance. And then when I want.
Ooh, the luxuries of modern life.
Yeah, the luxuries of modern life. Health insurance, who knew? So it's great. And then when creative projects come up, I can choose to say yes or no to them. And that's really exciting for me.
I have the sneaking suspicion, I'll just place my bet now, that the world of performing is not quite done with you yet.
Probably not. I would be lying if I said it was. So before all this stuff, I don't know if your listeners know this, but in January, the thing that kind of happened to me that went a little viral, where I went back to Broadway after not being on Broadway for a little while, and the news media and everybody picked up on it, and there were like these headlines of software engineer plays Elphaba on Broadway after 7 years. It surprised me, but it also didn't surprise me. When I left thinking I was done. And I think it was easy to leave when I left because of the pandemic, right? There was nothing going on when I started my journey before the pandemic, but I fully shifted into software engineering during the pandemic. So I never had feelings of like, I'm missing out on performing, because performing didn't exist. There was no Broadway for a while. And so once it kind of started to come back last year in the fall, I was like, maybe I missed it a little bit. And maybe I accidentally manifested it. But, when Wicked called and I flew back to New York for those shows, I was like, oh, this is really wonderful. Also, I'm really glad I don't have to do this 8 times a week. I'm so excited to go home. And I was like, having a little taste of it made me realize, oh, I can do this if I want to do this. I also don't have to do this if I don't want to do this. And that was it was very empowering. I was like, that feels nice.
I really appreciate you're taking so much time to talk about how you've gone through what at the time has got to have felt like a very strange set of career steps, but it's started to form into something that appears to have an arc to it. If people want to learn more, follow along as we continue to figure out what you're going to do next, where is the best place to find you?
Oh, good question, Corey. I do a website, carlastickler.com. Because I've had a lot of people, artists in particular, reaching out and asking how I did this, I'm starting to build some resources, and so you can sign up for my mailing list. I also am pretty big on Instagram if we're going to choose a social media. So my Instagram is Stickler Carla, and there's links to all that stuff on my website. But
and they will soon be in the show notes as well.
Yes, add them to the show notes. And I want to make sure that I want, a lot of people have seen my story and felt very inspired by it. A lot of artists who have felt that they too were failures because they chose not to go into art and get a regular 9-to-5. And so I'm trying to kind of put a little bit more of that out there so that people see that they're not alone. And so on my social media, I do post a lot of stories that people send to me, just telling me their story about how they made the transition and how they keep art in their life in different ways. And so that's something that also really inspires me. So I try to put their voices up too. So if anybody is interested in feeling not alone, feeling like there are other people out there, all of us, quote unquote, failed artists, there's a lot of us. And so I'm just trying to create a little space for all of us.
I look forward to seeing it continue to evolve. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Corey.
Carla Stickler, software engineer at G2, and so very much more. I'm cloud economist Corey Quinn, and this is Screaming in the Cloud. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And if it's on the YouTubes, smash the like and subscribe buttons, as the kids of today are saying. Whereas if you've hated this podcast, same thing. 5-star review, smash the buttons, but also leave an angry comment telling me exactly what you didn't like about this, and I will reply with the time and date for your audition.